I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here because this is one of my annoyances when we talk about some of the misinformation that's out there. And so people who are doing so much of just the fertilizer only growing, and then they see a tip that says to use epsom salts in your garden.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, we need magnesium and sulfate and all those things that we can get from that, but it's not in the form that's usable for a plant. And the reason you might see a benefit when you apply something like that to your garden is because your soil is so deficient in the nutrients because you're force feeding it these fertilizers that you might see a result. But,
Hmm.
like calcium, I see all the time, pour milk on your tomatoes to make them taste better. And, it's like because tomatoes need calcium. Well, uh, Dr. Elaine Ingham has said that essentially all soil on the planet has enough calcium.
Hmm.
You just have to give the plant the other nutrients that it needs to be able to absorb the calcium that's already there. And so people just in general waste so many household products in their garden that are really serving no purpose, but you've got somebody that is making a video about it and saying it's going to be a magic thing. And it just really isn't. I just want the simplicity of a good soil that grows me good plants, and I'll save the money I spend on eggs and milk and all those other things from the cupboards in my cupboards and not in my soil.
Well, and that's where, we both compost. And that's where your leftovers, your rotten stuff you put in your compost, in your compost, the biology is breaking all those cells apart.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of people don't really understand that in Mother Nature, she makes compost every fall with the leaves falling, etc. That's her form of compost. And if you're feeding plants, the biology has already broken everything out of the soil structure from your sand, silt, your clay, your other organic material to put into that leaf. So it actually takes a step out of the process,
yeah,
the energy necessary, because it's already been used once. It's a lot easier to use it again. It's like, Scott, if you go out to and you want to build a new garden bed, do you go out to the forest and knock down the tree? Or do you go to a place where the process has already been done for the
yeah.
wood?
That's right. Yeah, you go to the forest floor and you get the soil that's loaded with all the fungal activity and the bacterial activity. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. I don't want to have
Mhm.
to put a tree in my bed and wait for something to happen.
Well, unless you want mushrooms, because then you can get your tree, you put your mushroom plugs in, and you're eating good mushrooms. But
That's true.
it's a time thing and it's an energy thing. Like Scott, when we get to our age, we don't have as much energy as a 20-year-old anymore. So we want to take things a little bit more simply, the stuff that's already been broken down to be
Yeah.
used, whether we're building a garden bed or we're putting in wood chips on top for a mulch. We don't want to have to go out and do it ourselves.
Yeah, I like working with nature. You know,
Hmm.
nature has that whole process figured out. So if you can work with nature, do it. Because yeah, it's a lot less work. We're talking about weeds. I really don't weed my garden. Now,
Hmm.
in the individual beds, I will pull out plants that don't belong there, which is my definition of a weed. It's just a
Hmm.
plant growing in the wrong location. And occasionally that means it's a tomato plant. If I grew tomatoes in a bed one year and some of those cherry tomatoes fell to the ground and those seeds were in the soil, and then next spring those cherry tomato seeds sprout, and now I'm growing peppers in that bed. Well, the tomatoes are a weed and they get
Hmm.
pulled from that bed. But outside my active growing area, I let everything grow. I let all the dandelions grow. I let the purslane grow. I let the lamb's quarter grow. I let all of those things grow because they have a place in my environment. There, many
Mhm.
of them are attracting predatory insects. They might be attracting birds. They might be a magnet for the rabbits. So instead of the rabbits eating the plants in my bed, they're eating some of those native weeds that are along my fence. And so, how much effort is it to not weed? Well, yeah, I how long did I talk about it? That's as much effort as I've spent in weeding in a long time.
Yeah, exactly. I'd rather have the animal come in and eat the weed and give them nutrients than my having to pull the weed. But I'm a really lazy gardener, Scott.
Yeah, you and me both.